security. Additionally, 2 weeks ago, the New York State United Teachers acknowledged the masking in government-run schools remains the policy for now, but we're looking to the state health officials to set a clear off-ramp when the mask requirements in school can be relaxed. This is what many of us, including Mr. Seidberg, thank you, Dan, have been asking for: guidance, metrics, rules for the game, and off-ramp. Given what we know now about the ineffectiveness of math class, it's clear that only selfish hypochondriacs and tyrants want to force children to wear masks in school. What kind of adults do this? The Atlantic, New York Times, Washington Post, and NPR have recently written and spoken about masks having detrimental impacts to children, while obviously not slowing the spread of COVID.
I have to stop you now at 3 minutes.
I just got a couple more left, please. COVID policies.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir.
Can I just have a couple more seconds, please?
I'll give you like 5 more seconds to wrap it up.
COVID policies, whether you set them or not, have been a spectacular failure with severe unintended consequences, especially for children, while ultimately not preventing the spread of COVID. I hope you and the board reflect on your poor policies and how they failed to prevent the spread of COVID, how healthy kids were never given a risk, were never at a higher risk than the regular flu, and how this disaster can be allowed to happen again.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Can I come up again?
You've used your 3
I
minutes.
remember at one point you allowed somebody to speak for 5.5 minutes.
Sir, your time is up. Please have a seat.
You remember that?
Please have a seat.
All right. Well, there will be a reckoning, okay, for all these hooded individuals. All right, Mims?
Have a nice evening. Next up, Mr. David DiPaolo.
Before we continue,
Oh.
I just need to know, are masks required to be in the building right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're not going to continue this meeting until everybody is either wearing a mask or leaving. I'm making myself very clear. You're either wearing a mask or you're leaving. Period. Am I clear? You got it.
Can I remove my mask to speak?
You're aware of what the website says, right?
No, we're not having a debate on what that. Wearing a mask or you're leaving.
Hi, can I remove this mask to speak or no? Okay, great, thanks. Sure. I'm actually here on a similar task as my previous speaker here. I'd like to bring to the attention of the board that a lot of the COVID policies have been in place for 2 years, and they've been implemented kind of top down, where the board is making decisions based on state mandates, state and local government mandates. They're not actually getting input from the parents in the district. So what I'm here to basically ask 2 things. One is to recognize that a lot of parents in this school district are, not in favor of the current COVID policies, but we're also not getting any feedback, from the parents. So in other words, at this point in time, we have no idea how many parents in the school district are in agreement with the policies or not. And you need that information in order to make, decisions that are best for the parents in the school district. So that's my request. I'm going to make it very short and sweet. I'd like you to be a little bit more democratic in the process. Right now, it's been very technocratic, where policy is set by, leadership of the school and approved by the board. But you're not taking in any of the feedback from the local parents. And I think, that approach is not going to be, well taken for the long run. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And last, Mr. Charlie White.
Okay, on a lighter note. Okay, so 12 more Fayetteville-Manlius High School students in support of the banning of a policy that is, degrading grading, where students are assigned 0% or 50% grades for late submissions. Again, 12 more brave students on that regard. Just a couple points from last time I was here. I overheard Superintendent Tice mentioning that this was isolated to one particular department that was, I guess, the most egregious people who are doing this. That's not entirely true. Well, I will say that there is one department that is particularly does this a lot. There's definitely several faculty members who do this a lot in one particular department. It's not limited to one department. The notice that I brought up last year for when my daughter was at Wellwood was for different departments. You can look at the emails that you all have received regarding that. The one from 2016 and the one from this current year were from the same department. And I'll get into that next month about like how insane that is. I just want to make one other point now. The signatures that you've been receiving from me for the past 4 months now, these are all collected before the pandemic, okay? So I can't imagine, and the last year one was from during the hybrid, last year. And I think this policy is even particularly egregious when it's being applied during pandemic learning situations, whether it be remote, hybrid, whatever. I mean, the emphasis should be on education. The emphasis should be on learning, about penalizing students for late, submissions and so forth. So I just want to make a point that, I can't imagine how many signatures could be collected today if, about this matter, because it's still going on. It's going on now during the pandemic, during, all the other upheaval that students are under during this. My first Board of Education meeting I was here, there was a wonderful presentation on mental health services being offered in the district. And as a licensed clinical social worker for the last 25 years, I'm a big believer, certainly in those policies and the initiatives that have been done in this district. And one of the simplest ways to enhance mental health in this district is has fair and humane policies for students to grading policies and so forth. So I'm going to make that appeal as well up to this, that there being a change here such that students don't have to face, these 0% and 50% grades when they get, turn in something late. Again, one last time, it represents, if you think about it statistically, it represents 3 Fs. Okay, it's like a teacher giving you 3 Fs on an assignment when you get one of these 0% grades. Again, it's 100 down to 67, 67 down to 33, 33 to 0. So I mean that's a lot of consequence for one mistake. So I ask you please to consider making this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. All right, that's the last person that we had for public comment tonight. We'll move on now to our reports. First report, item 2.01, report state aid update, Assistant Superintendent Furlong.
Good evening, everyone. Give me a brief second here. There we go. Thank you. So this evening is the first budget workshop of the 22-23 budget season. We basically are going to talk quite a bit about state aid this evening, and a little bit about other revenues and where our tax levy limit is headed. So the first part of the agenda will really be covering the revenue side of the budget. We'll be looking at the governor's state aid proposal for this next year, and we'll touch upon other aspects of the revenue budget. We'll then take a brief look at current expenditure assumptions related to a wide variety of areas within our budget for next year. So just as a kind of a summary, the 2 largest revenue items are really property taxes and state aid. Since 2011, when the property tax cap legislation went into effect, we really had this formula that in effect calculates how much our tax levy limit can increase. For this current year, the tax levy accounted for 71% of our overall budget. So you can see that we're very heavily weighted towards property tax revenue in this district. However, the year before, we were at 74%. So it's definitely trending in the right direction. With regard to state aid, for the current year, state aid accounted for 26% of revenues, which is really up from 22% the prior year. So once again, we're looking pretty good. We're hopeful that they will pass the budget on time again so that April 1st we'll know exactly what our state aid is for next year. So looking at the state aid, Governor Hochul came out with the executive budget proposal on January 18th. We were once again pleasantly surprised that they're going to continue with their commitment to fully fund foundation aid. And going back a couple years when we were seeing that we were basically $7 million behind what the formula was calculating. So we received an additional 1.6 million last year, and this year we're receiving an additional 2.9 million, which is really a 25, almost 26% increase in foundation aid alone. A departure from the previous governor is that Governor Hochul basically put in that they're going to fully fund all the existing expense-based aid formulas. So BOCES aid, building aid, all the other expense-based aid categories will be fully funded, which in the past, that always seemed to be an annual battle. Once again, the executive budget proposal includes funding for implementation of universal pre-K. And it's basically the same amount we received or would have received in the current year for 84 students. So this next slide is really a line-by-line comparison of all the aid categories, comparing the budget for the current year with the budget or the executive proposal for next year. And once again, you can see it in bold that the increase in foundation aid is significant. Some of the other areas we have, some numbers are up and some numbers are down. We're still in the process of reconciling this information. We know that the high cost information is not accurate. They base that on a multi-year average, and we know that we're going to get more in the current year, and we know we will get more than what they listed next year. We're also reconciling BOCES aid and transportation aid, and we also feel that building aid, there were some recently submitted final cost reports in December that may not be in this number. So once again, we're in the middle of reconciling the state aid, but we plan to have that done. And then April 1st, hopefully we'll have final numbers. But you can see overall, we're getting a $3.2 million increase in state aid, which is really good news. As for the tax levy limit, there's really three main components. First of all is the inflation factor, which is tied to Consumer Price Index or CPI. Actual CPI, and they use an average 1 year to the next, was actually 4.7%. Where that cap comes in was 2%. So we cannot get any more than 2% on an index related to inflation. However, it can go down under the current rules, it can go down to 0. We also have a taxable growth factor. This is real brick and mortar growth within our district. It really equates to a little bit more than 0.25%. This is also the lowest factor we've had since the implementation of the tax levy limit. We also have a capital exclusion, and that's yet to be determined. We're still in the process of doing the calculation on that. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Part of it is we need to finalize the building aid for next year. And the other kind of missing piece is we're going to have a bond sale at the end of this year. And we have to kind of estimate what that debt is going to be for the following year on a bond that hasn't been sold yet. So we're in the process of really trying to fine tune what that estimate is going to be. So right now, the combination of inflation and that growth factor gives us a preliminary tax levy increase of 2.27%. We do know that with the capital exclusion, that will be higher. It's just a matter of how much. And therefore, for the preliminary budget planning, we are using the 2.27%. As a point of comparison, last year was 1.1. However, even if it was 2.27 or even a little bit higher, we believe that because of growth in the tax base, we anticipate the tax rates will be lower than the current year. The only caveat on that is it's really dependent upon any changes in equalization rates, and they will not be finalized until either July or August this year. All other revenues, this really makes up a small portion of the budget. We do budget these areas conservatively. It's a wide variety of miscellaneous income that we've listed here. And we usually look at like a 5-year trend. The last 2 years have not been very good because of the pandemic. It's really impacted some of these other revenue line items. But we're really, kind of looking at the previous 3 years that were complete years and kind of guesstimate what the amounts would be based on that. So this next slide is really a listing of all those other revenue categories and pretty much a comparison budget to budget. You can see there's, some swings there. Most are increasing. However, there are some that are decreasing. Probably the most significant increase, overall, we're going up $242,000. Most significant increase is really in the Medicare and Medicaid area. We're hopeful that interest rates will return to a little bit more of a normal next year, which might give us a benefit on that interest income line as well. Because I know we're not going to hit the 70,000 in the current year. So appropriate fund balance. This is not a revenue. It's basically an appropriation of our surplus. Fund balance is really just an accumulated surplus over time. And basically, in my mind, it's a way of returning the surplus to the taxpayer. Or basically, instead of raising taxes, and in this case, we've been running about $750,000 a year for the last few years. It's really returning that to the taxpayer to balance the budget. On the budget side, or the expenditure side, first and foremost, we're building our budget around this district strategic plan, as we usually do, or always do. We are seeing impact of inflation on purchases and other expenditures, and we've reflected those in the 22-23 budget. We also are seeing a significant increase because of the budgetary appropriation for what we call transfer to capital projects. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a slide or two. So payroll and benefits, which make up about 75% of our overall budget. From a staffing standpoint, we don't see any significant changes. At least we're not anticipating that. We are basing our contractual salary increases on either existing collective bargaining agreements or forecasted settlements, because we do have a number of contracts that are up at the end of this current year. As for breakage, on average, we usually have about 7 retirements per year. That generates about $250,000 in savings. And I believe right now we're at either 7 or 8 retirements already. So we'll pretty much be on average for this coming year. In terms of benefits, health insurance premiums, we are seeing a 6% increase in the premium. And for teachers' retirement system costs, we are seeing about a 5% increase in the employer contribution rate. So for every dollar we pay our teachers and teaching assistants and administrators, we have to contribute those percentages towards retirement. So we're seeing an increase from 9.8% to 10.3%, basically. On the employee retirement side, it's quite the opposite. We're seeing, the ERS contribution percentage has really been around 15, 16% for years. And we're seeing a major reduction from 16% to a little bit under 12% for this next year. That's going to generate some significant savings. As for building and department level budgets, basically we do issue what are called supply quotas to keep it, even and fair between buildings. We do listen to specific requests from building administrators and department leaders, and we build those into the budget as best we can. We are looking at a slight increase in instructional technology. We've been able to build that up over the last couple of years for a variety of reasons. And we also have a significant number of maintenance projects for this next year. Once again, our building administrators and department supervisors, they were very, very reasonable in their request for next year, which is really appreciated. So transfer to capital, this is what I mentioned earlier. Basically, what this is really a budgetary appropriation, and we use it to fund limited scope capital improvement projects. Historically, we've had that be around $450,000 a year, but for this next year, we're planning on increasing that to $1.5 million. We feel that we have the fiscal capacity to do that because of the increase in foundation aid. And basically, that fund would be used to do two major capital projects. One would be to improve security at Enders Road Elementary, basically closing off that entrance to the courtyard and to two different parts of the building. There would be some other security measures that we would build in that we've done in other buildings as well. The other part of it would be the installation of air conditioning at Fayetteville Elementary. So in summarize, basically, a lot of the cost increases are either due to contractual agreements already in place or inflation, and then also the budgetary appropriation for that capital improvement project I just mentioned. And once again, as we anticipate that the budget increase will be similar to last year, we feel that increase in foundation aid will more than offset our reliance on the tax levy. We think we're going to be in real good shape, not needing to go out to the full tax levy this year, but that's yet to be determined. And then once again, the budget is in alignment with the district's strategic plan. So what's down the road? Well, we have our second budget workshop scheduled for March 14th, a little bit more than a month from now. And at that time, we'll have the full preliminary budget for review by the Board of Education, all the expenditure side of the budget, all of the revenue side, and a discussion on the budget recommendations for next year. The third budget workshop will be a little less than a month after that, early April. And then the proposed budget presentation and adoption will occur April 18th with a budget hearing on May 9th and the budget vote, universal vote date in New York State, which is the third Tuesday in May or May 17th this year. Any questions from the board? Once again, I think this is a really good starting point. I think there's been years where we really had to find a way to bring the budget in alignment between revenues and expenditures. It really isn't that way this year, which is really great news.
Any questions for Bill? No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, item 2.02, the President's Report. It is Bus Driver Appreciation Month. So on behalf of the board, I want to extend our gratitude to our bus drivers. Without our bus drivers, we're not going to be able to have our in-person school. And I'm sure everyone has heard about several districts who've had to go to online schools because of their bus driver shortage. But we've been very fortunate to have a stable group of bus drivers who do a wonderful job every day, bringing our students to school safely, and we very much appreciate their hard work. So I want to recognize our bus drivers for Bus Driver Appreciation Month. And then lastly, I just want to say thank you to our FM community, in particular our staff, Dr. Tice, the teachers, and our students for your patience. We are coming upon the 2-year anniversary of when the world changed and a lot of different things have happened since then. And we understand that there are a lot of frayed nerves and a lot of frustration. Our staff, our teachers, our senior leadership, everybody is working very hard to provide the best environment for students under very challenging circumstances. And I just want to say on behalf of the board, thank you very much to our families for your continued patience, and thank you very much to all of our staff members for your hard work in these very difficult times. Dr. Tice?
Thank you, President Mims. For my initial superintendent's report, the attachment is in board docs for your review. Under the Central New York School Boards Association update, a number of our Board of Education members, who are also members of the ad hoc DEI committee of the board, are participating in the Central New York School Boards Association book study with Dr. George Theo Harris on his new book entitled 5 Practices for Equity-Focused School Leadership. The same book is being used in another study group with our administrators and other administrators throughout Central New York. And so we're excited to be part of that. These efforts continue to honor the first phase of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework roadmap, which is to raise awareness in advance of building capacity and the implementation phases. Our Board of Education also participated in a retreat at the end of January to learn more about the CRS education framework. And the district also hosted a recent parent council session, which was devoted to the district's DEI work to date. In fact, our policy committee, our ad hoc DEI committee, will meet separately later this week to discuss our next steps, including the adoption of a DEI policy for the district. Under strategic planning and capital project updates, as I've mentioned before, our strategic planning continues forward, targeting the recent passage of the community referendum for a capital improvement project at the high school. This much-needed project will address aging infrastructure needs, in addition to programmatic improvements and classroom upgrades and enhancements. Some of our initial planning meetings have already taken place as we begin to engage faculty in the schematic design process. Our facilities committee will meet later this week to hear some updates about this work. Under UPK update, as you are aware, our request for proposals is out and about, seeking partnerships with outside providers to offer universal pre-kindergarten services. The RFP is due in mid-February, which will allow us to vet the prospective providers in March and to make any awards during the budget development cycle in April. The inaugural year of UPK will feature about 84 seats, as Mr. Furlong just mentioned, for students, thanks to the governmental startup funding included in the budget. Under Regional Science Olympiad, I'm pleased to conclude my report and say that our FM High School Science Olympiad team took first place in the regional competition, which was held at FM High School at the end of January. Thanks to Dr. Kilmer and the entire Science Olympiad crew for being able to step in and fill in when one of the local universities was unable to host. And we congratulate our Science Olympiad team, which is now qualified for the New York State competition. This ends my initial report.
Thank you, Dr. Tice. I did have a question about the universal pre-K. I know it's going to be some sort of a lottery system for those initial 84 seats, but is there any way or is there any thought about prioritizing a small portion of that for some students who may be coming in who with special needs at all, who may really need that service a little bit more?
According to the regs, we cannot.
You cannot?
It's strictly a
Okay.
lottery system. It's a great question, and I think the task before us, after we establish a foothold with the first year, is whether we will wrestle with adding additional local funding to support the expansion of that beyond. But I think initially, we want to just start up with the government funding.
Thank you. Additional questions for this part of Dr. Tice's report? Dan?
Yeah, I just actually had a question on the same topic. I know you said before that it's strictly a lottery basis, and I get that and understand that. But does that preclude us from attaching communications to our community when the lottery opens? Because there's simple realities. We have some families that simply can't afford it, and we have other families that can. And if we can encourage those who have the means by which to pay for it to not enter themselves into that lottery. That's obviously a community service to those in our community who have greater need. And I would hope that we can put together a communication strategy around that to really ask people to refrain from entering into that lottery unless they genuinely have a need for it. So is that something that is within the scope of what we are allowed to do?
I don't know if we can spin it that way. It's a great question. We can do some research on it, but certainly communicating deadlines and so forth and getting the word out so nobody misses it for whatever reason, I think we can do our best that way. But I can research the other piece.
There has been talk, there has been chatter around town about the equity piece to that, the fairness to that and I think many people are cognizant of that. But I think if we can encourage people to be more cognizant of that in choosing whether or not to put their kids in that lottery, I think that would be really beneficial
And
to
some of
those
it
who need
too,
more
I'm
in our
sorry.
community.
And some of it too will be provider related. I mean, whether we pick one provider or multiple providers, that may have some impact for families that have already registered with those particular providers for whatever service.
Right.
I just have another, not to get too much stuck into the weeds about what's going to happen. I don't know if you've thought about this, but to that point, similarly related, what will the lottery look like? I guess I'm always thinking of those programs where you have to log in at a certain time and then you get shut out. Will there be like a process where people have time to like put in their paperwork and it's all due on a certain day so that folks, have different opportunities to be able to apply rather than like logging in and having to be, the first one to
Yeah,
log in?
and unlike one of the vaccine clinics and just logging in and the space is there, we will have them register and then we will randomly select from those who have registered.
Okay, so there's not like a limit, like once you hit the limit, they can just register and then
Correct.
from there it's like
So it's
name
not
and a
first
hat.
come, first served, so.
Okay.
So my other question, Dr. Tice, was Science Olympiad. You'd given us some information about that earlier this week. Is there any update to that on the state competition?
On the state competition, one of the local universities is or scheduled to host, but with the New York State, with a number of teams, I don't think we'll be able to step up if that's the need. So I have not heard one way or another whether that university is able to provide the venue. But just given the magnitude of the number of teams, it would be difficult for us to host again. I think we were able to pull off the regional effort with a lot of work, but the New York State competition would be difficult.
Okay, Dr. Tice's second report, the COVID update.
Also in your board docs is the update for your review. If it looks different, it's because I updated the statistics today. As I always kid, this looks like the sports score report. So these are updated through the board meeting. Under COVID update and quarantine analysis, as the second semester of the school year begins in earnest, to date we've had 680 confirmed cases in the school district, with 435 coming at the middle high school level and 245 at the elementary level. Ironically, we witnessed 175 positive cases from the start of the school year until the beginning of the holiday recess period in late December. Since the beginning of that holiday break, we have tallied 505 positive cases with the recent Omicron surge. Under symptomatic update, at this point in the school year, the district sent home 521 students because they were symptomatic during the school day. This includes 171 students at the high school, believe it or not, 77 students at each of the middle schools, and an average of 66 children at each of the elementary buildings. Given our enrollment as a school district, you've heard me say this before, I think it's testimonial to the hard work of our families in partnership to keep their children home if they're experiencing any COVID-related symptoms. Under test to stay, as you may already be aware, we were awarded our licenses to serve as limited service laboratories. We also recently received approval from the Onondaga County Health Department regarding our testing protocols so that we are able to administer the rapid testing to students in an effort to reduce the quarantine period. Since it was designed and approved to test school-based exposures, the Test to Stay initiative is really limited in its application right now, which is tough. It was kind of sold as the cure-all for everything because this is not supported by any formalized contact tracing. As you recall, the contact tracing went away. And that's my next item, contact tracing. As mentioned before, Onondaga County and New York State have moved away from contact tracing to an attestation system. So accordingly, we're taking a hiatus from contact tracing at the local level. We're really not deputized anymore to continue to post confirmed, but we continue to post confirmed positives on the data dashboard as information trickles in to the district. Under surveillance testing, as mentioned earlier, Onondaga County continues to collaborate with local area school districts to conduct random COVID testing of employees at periodic intervals and students. Since its inception of the program, believe it or not, we have sampled 1,452 individuals, over 1,000 students, and about 400 faculty and staff, with 12 reported pooled positive cases at the portal quadrant. After witnessing only a couple positive cases on the surveillance testing leading up to that late December holiday recess that I mentioned, we've witnessed an additional 10 positive cases during the first couple of weeks in January. And then last but not least, under rapid COVID test distribution, the governor's office continues to dispatch rapid test kits as they become available to the Central New York School District via the OCM BOCES. Since we are reaching a point, and they've been coming in piecemeal, where we're able to have enough for our entire student population, we are planning to make them available to those families who are interested upon the request. A lot of the market is already saturated with those rapid tests right now, and some school districts have found that the families are not using them or picking them up. So I think we'll do it as a request-only basis. That ends my COVID report.
Questions from the board?
I was just curious if we've seen a slowdown in reported cases over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, compared to the first 2 weeks in January, we've seen it slow down. In part, I think, because they've stopped the contact tracing. It's strictly on the attestation system. So the assumption is some families are completing the attestations and others are not. So it has trickled down, whether that's just because no contact tracing and it's moved to the attestation, or there truly has been a drop off. It might be a combination of both.
I also thought I read somewhere that the governor was planning to distribute tests for February break.
I'm sorry?
I had heard that the governor was planning to distribute more tests for families for February break. I think I read it in one of her weekly updates.
Yeah, we have them now. They've been coming in, not enough. As you may recall, for January 3rd, we had just under what we needed for everybody. Now, over the last few weeks, they've been coming in batches. So we've collected enough for the 4,200 students that we have, so we can distribute them again. It can also be upon request. We don't want to have them thrown out because the market's saturated. So certainly if families make requests, the buildings can make sure that they get them home.
So will we communicate that out to the
Yes.
families that
Yep.
it'll be
So-
upon request?
Yep.
Okay.
So we will communicate that, and probably in time for the February break, as you said.
Additional questions for Dr. Tice? Okay. Next is our RR committee and representative updates. Let's see. Audit, I believe that was our last agenda, or no? Is there any update from audit?
Yes, as you probably read in your committee reports, we did meet on the 24th, just prior to our retreat evening, and Jim Buffum came to us virtually from Rochester EFPR, and he said there were no high-risk areas and no official findings, and it was another clean report, which we're always happy to hear, and goes to our business department. When asked what we would like to study over the next time period, Mr. Furlong recommended that Medicaid be the audit area for this year. So the committee discussed it and decided that that indeed is what we will ask them to do for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Community Relations is meeting on March 1st. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is meeting on Wednesday, it looks like. Did you want to say anything about the retreat briefly, Bill? Not to put you on the spot, but it was a great retreat if you wanted to mention it or say a few things. about it.
No, I can. We had a retreat on the 24th that I thought went really well with our staff people knowledgeable from BOCES. One thing to note is that they did express the fact that they, from their vantage point, having worked with other districts, that FM is very ahead of the curve. So that was nice to hear. Doesn't mean that we don't still have work to do, but I think they helped us understand the different parts of the CRSE framework from the state. And we focused a little bit on the ideas of welcoming and belonging, so that all of our students feel welcome and that they do belong here at FM. So it seemed like, I don't want to speak for the whole board, but it seemed like it was a fruitful and informative and interesting evening.
Thanks, Kelly. Let's see. Next, Facilities has a meeting scheduled on February 10th. Any additional on the updates? Okay. Finance met on January 27th.
Yeah, I'll just add a big thank you to Bill and his staff for the budget presentation tonight and the way things are panning out. When it comes time to adopt a budget, it should be well received by the public.
Thank you very much. Policy last met in November, and they're scheduled to meet tomorrow. Let's see, FM Education Foundation, any update, Sherry?
No updates.
Okay. Legislative liaison update?
They have started, through NISBA, has started doing some budget advocacy. There was a training last week that I listened in on. They called NISBA Capital Conference, where they had some people who could explain what Bill explained very well, and how we should advocate. And then the 9th this week is when they do some virtual advocacy, where meeting with our legislators. So I'll be listening in. I listened in already, and I'll listen in this week, so that I can update if there's any points that we need to advocate for.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, moving on to new business. Item 3.01, approval of the minutes from January 10th. Is there a motion to approve the January 10th minutes? Thank you, Mark, and a second from Daryl. Any discussion of those minutes? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? We have 2 abstentions. Item 3.02, approval of the minutes from the January 24th special meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Thank you, Sherry. A second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? 1 abstention, 2 abstentions. Next, item 3.03, memoranda of agreement with the Town of Manlius Police Department. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District, that the superintendent is hereby authorized to sign the memorandum of agreement with the Town of Manlius Police Department for overtime payment for the special patrol officers? Is there a motion? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Dan. Discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next, item 3.04, authorization. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District makes the following authorization as presented? in regards to extra classroom funds. Is there a motion? Thank you, Rebecca, and a second from Sherry. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Ongoing business for development, as Kelly said, we had a very good retreat with Dr. Doughton from OCM BOCES, and I believe the board, we did discuss having a follow-up DEI retreat with Dr. Doughton, so we will work on scheduling that. Maybe that could be the topic of discussion for the DEI committee meeting that's coming up this week. Did you want to add something, Rebecca?
No, I was just going to suggest that we do discuss it because there did seem to be consensus that we continue on. It was a wonderful 2-hour discussion, and it felt like it was just the tip of the iceberg with more conversation to follow.
Thank you. Working agenda items, potential considerations, future meeting calendar. All right, dates to remember. We've got another parent council meeting on the 1st. Thank you to those who were able to attend the last one. Oh, and the musical's on the calendar. That's exciting to see. Okay. Next, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Daryl. All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, so we do have 2 items for executive session. One is to discuss possible or tax cert claims against the school district, and the other item is the superintendent's mid-year evaluation. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session for those 2 items? Thank you, Kelly, and a second from Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? All right, this is going to conclude the board's public portion of the meeting. We're going to go into executive session and not have anything afterwards for public. Thank you very much.